Welcome in Food for Thought. I am Karen Nodrick, and my guest today is Algernon. Algernon. We are discussing the most banned book in schools. There it is, Gender Queer. The book originally was labeled or advised by the author of the book to be for 16 plus. And after all the controversy, it got labeled 18 plus. And let's look into it. What is so controversial about this book? Just a short disclaimer, I haven't read the book. And so, Algernon, could you present the book? What it's about?
Sure. I'll try not to summarize the whole thing because obviously it would be too much. But so it's by Maia Kobabe. I think I'm saying their name right. And it's a memoir. So it's the person's actual life experience, but done as a graphic novel. And she's an artist. And let's say it's just a random page I'm opening up to so you can see the level of the drawing. And it's the story of her childhood into her young adulthood. And she, I think up until about 24. And she ends up being kind of non-binary by the end of the book. And this is her journey to being that. I can't quite remember if they end up on they or not for pronouns, but through most of the book, she is she. And it's a sweet tale. And in the end, it casts it as a positive light of just this is her story and this is another way to be. Because it's a graphic novel, there's a lot of drawings, and she goes into all sorts of things that went on in her childhood that she had difficulty with. So there are some fairly provocative images in the book about menstruation and about sexual things and masturbation and her sexual fantasies. And the book, being called Genderqueer, is about her journey through gender and her gender expression. So that is kind of the summary of the book. I don't think we want to show the controversial pictures. Depends. No, okay. But they're portraying, but in that kind of drawn format, some sexual acts between two biologically female people.
Okay.
Do you want me to say what it is?
No.
It looks like oral sex. But with one of the characters pretending to be male by using a device. And by the way, in the recounting of it, she's like, "We did that. I thought it was going to be really good, and it turns out it kind of sucked because I couldn't feel anything because it wasn't my body."
What?
Yes, we're gonna make ourselves 18 plus like, if we describe the details.
She did not even do the thing. She just did an illusion of a thing. She's imitated.
She had she was very excited about the idea of having this strap-on device and getting oral sex while she was wearing it. And so she drew that, and then people show this picture, and it looks kind of like two young men in the picture, but it's not. And they haven't read the book. They've just seen the image and they've seen the brouhaha about it. And so a lot of people were just going off on all kinds of tangents because they haven't bought the book. They're just echoing other people's controversial takes at the moment. And this book got really caught up in that. And I think that masks the real conversation, which is, is this an appropriate book, and what might be the problems with it? And, what are the ideas it suggests, and does it belong in a public school, and at what age? That's kind of the real discussion that you want to have. But when people just frame whatever images in there and say, "Oh my God, look at this," it tends to get people really excited.
Yeah, show me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are they showing? And then you realize you're going home and you're just watching Netflix or something. You're like, all right, I saw some stuff on Netflix that was really questionable. And my kids watch that all the time. So I'm not sure that we're really having an authentic conversation about these books. So as I was watching a lot of people comment on it, Most of the complaints, it gets framed as pornography. And having read it like that, it didn't strike me as particularly pornographic. Like it's not at a high level. It's a simple drawing type thing. Um, and some of the claims that were being made were actually just bad framings because it's a graphic novel. So there's photos. And so people will put up one of the photos and make some claim about it. Say, this is a photo of, and describe it. And they don't even have it right because they haven't read the book and they're just parroting what somebody else said. But there is a picture of sexual acts of a couple different kinds in the book, drawn. And so in that sense, it is definitely a pornographic, it has some pornographic images in the book. But it struck me that like that's not even the real issue. Like the book is controversial for, I think, very different reasons, or at least that's where the real discussion is what was the messages of the book and are those appropriate to have in a school library? Especially say like middle school, it's definitely difficult to make that claim. And the author herself says, or they themselves, I'm not sure what they're going by now, says like age 16 was the original recommendation, you said. And that's an easier call at that age to say like, well, you're fairly well along in your development at age 16 mentally, I would say. And you've been exposed to an awful lot of ideas in today's world, not just from these books that happen to be in your school library. So the impact that people would claim and say, if this book is in the library, then some great travesty. I think the kids are exposed to a lot of those the controversial messages that are in the book, which is kind of pro the idea of having a non-binary gender or a variety of queer genders, like genders that aren't just male and female. And that idea itself is really pretty common amongst kids, like in the world in which the information world in which they exist. And so when the adults, I think, come to this conversation and they're not aware of that, for them, it's very, very foreign and alarming. So it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I see people trying to protect their kids and saying like, we don't want them to have this idea. And like, let's get that book out of the library. At the same time, the kids are exposed to much, much, much more in much of their own culture. So you're not really shielding them from it. But I can still see the argument to say the things that we put in the public school library should be things that are kind of universally accepted across every diverse culture and religious background and teachings. Like we're not going to try to encourage one and discourage another. Mm-hmm. And so maybe in a public school context, like stay away from those controversial areas. So I can see part of that argument there. But originally with the pornography, I was like, it's not, there's some point there, but it's not the major issue. I think the cultural issues surrounding having genders beyond the two that's the discussion really.
Do you think this book normalizes or promotes the non-binary expression, like sexuality?
It does. I mean, it's a memoir of a young lady as she goes through her life. It's an autobiography. There, it claims to be an autobiography. Reason to disbelieve her.
Yeah.
In the end, though, it's a positive story, and I could see a young person who's questioning and sort of caught up in this part of the culture right now, reading this book and basically having this be one of probably many different stimuluses that says like, yeah, see, you could do this. These are valid choices. And so in a way, to put that in the public school library it does put kind of a stamp of approval, because you're like, oh, the librarian, the school, the administration, hey, look, there's a poster on the wall. That's like official sanction. Or the flag is running, the rainbow flag is like on the school library flagpole. That is official stamp of approval.
Mhm.
And it's a little bit, anyway, it's it does cross, I think, a boundary there if the school is promoting these things.
I agree.
Now, is that promotion really a problem given everything else that the kids are exposed to? I don't know. That's even more, that's a, most kids are exposed to a lot of things. And changing one or two books that happen to be in the section of the library has so small an impact.
I wonder, when a teenager, let's say, confused or doesn't know himself or herself yet, there is this seeking experimentation stage where people will just try out different things. And now the question is, should the information about somebody who tried out that and it worked out be available, or should like kids try out something else? You read a quote from there where she said, should I show it to other people? Should I share my experience with other people? Is it immoral not to?
Yeah, at the end of the book, she's teaching in an art class as a non-binary person, and she's adopts the stance that she needs to be open about her being non-binary, because there may be other kids who are in her class who are ready to be non-binary, and she wants to, allow allow that role model that she did not have to become non-binary. And so you can see how her framing of her story, of this memoir, casts it all as like a positive, normalized, oh, here's the thing you can do. You might just be non-binary. And that idea is actually really controversial for a lot of people.
Okay, so there is like many options for the child who is confused, let's say, or a young adult who is confused. She adds another option, plus she gives a manual to it.
Yeah, a little bit of a manual, like it puts out some guideposts. There's actually a lot of references in the book. It's like, you should read this, and you should go see what this doctor says about it. But of course, all of those references are positive and in line with the idea of there being a non-binary option. And I mean, frankly, there is a non-binary, you can be non-binary in your life. But then the question really here is that a book that you put in the library, in the school library?
I think about the school library, it definitely not in elementary or middle school.
We can't conceive of this as maybe like even when we were growing up, you would never be able to find this material like unless there was a book at your library, at your school, because like you didn't have access to any other books, really. Bookmobile thing, but that was like our whole universe of books, that and whatever we had at home. But that's not the case anymore. Like for these kids, they're on the internet. There's a bajillion things out there and communities and ideas and manga, we talked about it and stuff, where all of these concepts and far beyond them are in all that stuff. So to make it all about like this book being available in the library, and if it weren't, then the kid wouldn't be exposed to those ideas. That's not true. They will be exposed to those ideas just out there. Whether or not the school should be putting its kind of stamp of approval on it, I think that's valid I would lean on the side of saying no to that, to saying it's controversial enough. There are cultures and people who would find this very offensive, whether or not they really care that their kid is exposed to it. Like they wouldn't bring your kid to a certain movie or something. And they're like, and I don't want you to push it or even have it available for them at school. Because that's not the way we're raising them, and da da da. We don't want you to put it in a positive light because we put it in a negative light, and now we're in conflict with the school. So we would much prefer that you just don't discuss it, you know, with our kid. We will talk to our kid about it. And I think that's a valid position. And that public schools, what's in the public school library is part of that discussion to say like, all right, let's keep, there's a lot of great literature that we could put out there.
I haven't read the book. And so from what I kind of researched, from the arguments against that book being available in a school library, I tend to agree with the arguments, even though I haven't read the book.
Just say like promoting the idea of non-binary as in a positive light. Like, is that an okay message for a book in a public library or a public school library rather? So even without having read the book, like, is that idea crossing a line?
It depends on a school. Definitely not in general schools, not in public schools. Changing schools is very difficult. It's like your child goes to the nearest school or to the school in
You're talking
your
about
area.
here or in the States?
Also here in Poland, a child goes to the nearest school, and people like have limited choice of schools.
I think there's two interesting parts there that I want to highlight. One is, I think a lot of times people do discount when they just say like, you should homeschool, or, you know, you can just send your kid to a different school, but that is not easy. That is actually quite difficult for most people. And they can't afford, they can't like, oh yeah, I can come up with however much money to send my kid to private school all of a sudden, or I can drive my kid back and forth to school, like if they have jobs, and it's not always feasible. And so it's very disingenuous to sort of dismiss the debate and say, just change schools. But also, we shouldn't be so glib about the fact that it's available in the library, and you could go to your kid, or they could mark the books in the library and have them in like a little side section, and you could tell, which is probably in like an LGBT section in there. And like you could advise your kid, like, I don't want you checking out any books from that section. Like, I know there are books in there that we disagree with, and you can talk to them about that or whatever. So like the presence of those books isn't necessarily catastrophic to your kid, to raising your kid without those ideas. You might just say they're in the library, but don't check any of that stuff out.
Okay, I understand. I haven't read the book, so
Right.
but like the idea of non-binary for a person who is looking for who they are, and they kind of like trying to understand who they are, and they feel like they had been told who they are all their life. It's like one of the options they can choose from, and if it's presented in a way that is like that is attractive, it might mean that they will choose this as part of their identity. There is an example I want to mention. I read about demisexuality. It's a new kind of new formulated form of asexuality. And
so it's the emotional attachment as part of it.
Yes, so like a person cannot experience any physical attraction without having emotional attachment first, emotional connection. And as I read that, I was like, that sounds like me. I also cannot experience any physical attraction to another person without being emotionally attracted to that person. I immediately labeled myself as demisexual. even though I'm not sure it is true or like it is correct. Perhaps it's just like normal.
We can make up an infinity of these labels. We've seen dozens of them get spun so far, and we're 10, 15 years in. And what do you do with that label later on? And I think from people's experiences, they will change through them. They'll say, "Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm that." I had a nephew. Well, he's kind of a nephew, and he was like 12 at the time, and the conversation was going around the room. His older brother had come out as gay, and so we were all like, "What are you? What are you? What are you?" And the young girl who's the same age as the gay brother was like, she's like, "I'm straight." And then the younger one is like, "I'm pansexual." And the rest of us in the room are like, "Wait, we're gonna need a decoder ring to understand what that means." Anyway, there's a lot of different ones, and they're labels, and I'm not sure what you do with the labels. And then you change through them as where you are in your life changes. It's a different thing from just straight up gender. And like the word has been kind of overlaid there to say now there's many, many genders. And I'm like, nah, you're changing the definition of the word there. No strong prohibition against people doing that, but then to propagate that out and mix up all the normal gender and sexual like separate spaces and things like that and create a lot of controversy around those things because of this gets really confusing. Like which bathroom do the demisexuals use? Like it doesn't matter. Like they use the one that correlates to their biological sex.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'm thinking about the idea and desire to belong. And when you are labeled as this group, you belong to that group. And it's a community suddenly. You're like a part of some community.
I'm thinking that just all the kids who are adopting these various identities, we could call them, I have heard that there is pressure among themselves to choose one, and you don't want to. Generally, it's somehow considered uninteresting if you were just like, no, I'm just straight. Like that's not a great choice. It's sort of like choosing the least good identity you might. And so, like you say, if you're like, oh no, I really feel like I need more of an emotional attachment. Like, okay, like now I'm a demisexual. So now that you have claimed one of the special identities, then you belong to the group of people with special identities. You're not just a straight person, but that just a straight person thought is behind it still, I think. Like they want to be special. They want to be part of this group. They want to be, maybe it's the special part. I don't know. They want to, there's belonging to a special group. And I think there's social pressure amongst them to choose one of these many new identities.
Have you heard the expression cisgender?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be cisgender. Cisgender is not cool. Cisgender is already
I guess it's a matter of
term.
It's a matter of coolness, I guess. It turns out it's going to be important to propagate the species forward, but that doesn't seem to be the primary concern of the people having the conversation. They also have a general belief that like the world is overpopulated and therefore you should not have kids. Like that being, at least in the States, I don't know how common it is, but I hear a lot about that.
In Poland, the conversation about the world being overly populated is not happening yet. I did learn it from US TV shows like Bill Maher. The contradictory point of view was by Elon, who's like, no, we need more children.
Right.
Is there anything you would like to add to our discussion?
My final take on it, and I don't I don't think individuals should necessarily stand and say like this book should or should not be allowed in the school library. But I do think that the discussion of the book is good for people to have and to understand what's in there, and that some people may find just the idea of having a positive story of somebody who becomes non-binary, that might be very anathema to how they want to raise their kids. And they may be somewhat self-deluded as to whether or not they can insulate their kids from that in today's culture. Like the kid's going to get all sorts of stuff that goes far beyond what's in these books, just on the internet. But my final thing would be, I would still come down on the side of saying this shouldn't be in a high school library necessarily. Like it shouldn't be in the public library, because the books that are put there should be of literary and educational value. And this is definitely some issues that aren't universal across all cultures. And we're trying to be multicultural and sensitive to a lot of different people's ways of thinking and being in the world. And so part of that is saying we're not going to put our stamp of approval on it as the public school. So even though it kind of paints, people will say, oh, it's anti-gay or anti-trans or whatever. It's not. It's just saying that this book, because of the themes, I would say, is not really an appropriate choice for a public school. So I would come down on that side of that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for introducing me that book. And if people are interested, check the book out.
Links in the description. I think the author is a very talented graphic artist. And I wouldn't discourage anyone from reading the book, especially, if you're already sort of on that path. But I do see the issue of, should it be in a public school as a separate question.
Thank you again. And please check out Algernon's Twitter and how to find and kind of interact. Perhaps do a rebuttal on the topics just raised.
Sure. I'm always open to, I guess, authentic discussion about it.
And see you in the next Food for Thought. Bye. I have that book. It's in Polish. Let me translate it for
translation
you.
There.
Stories for kids who dare to be different. True tales of amazing people who stood up and stood out. By Ben Brooks. And Algernon has 2 books. Algernon, what books do you have?
Let's start with this one. It's called The Complete Mouse. And this is a story about the Holocaust, and it's a graphic novel. And the second one, this is one that's banned from some schools, or banned from all public schools, I think, in something like 32 states now. The reason I have this book is because it spawned such controversy, and the news and reporting on things is so confusing that I thought, wow, in this one case, I can actually just get the book and read it. So inform my own opinions.
You're not at school anymore, so you can read whatever you want.
It's true. I did not get this from the kids' school library. There's a thing called Amazon now, where you can go boop, and there you go. Send them some money.
We are not sponsored by Amazon.
Not yet.